few weeks ago now, we saw the release of the Miraculous London Special, which served as both a final conclusion to the old Agrest story arc, wrapping up the hanging plot threads of the finale, whilst also ushering in a new era for the franchise, setting up Lila as the new big antagonist as she takes up the mantle of Hawkmoth in this second saga of the show. As part of that vision of out with the old, in with the new, we did see a lot of future potential storylines start to take shape, while some changes were seemingly integrated into the writing. The biggest of these notable shifts, at least in my opinion, is in regards to the direction of Marinette's character, her arc and story, and the way her actions are perceived in and out of the narrative. The long and short of it is that in this special, the writing goes out of its way to show that Marinette's not infallible, that she's not always right. It goes out of its way to tell you that she's making the wrong choice by not telling Adrian the truth of what his dad's getting up to, and that she's making the wrong choice by not bringing Kagami's mum to justice. On top of that, it's clear that with Lila in the driver's seat as Hawkmoth, the heroes are more vulnerable than ever. They have Marinette go out of her way to overtly state that Lila is clearly a step up compared to Gabe as the main villain. Plus, they have Lila take the victory in her debut. Hell, not only does she win, but she wins so hard that Ladybug and Bunnix need to resort to time travel and extreme plot armor to finally stop her from discovering Ladybug's identity and making her reality warping, timeline destroying wish. So suffice to say, the events of this special are a pretty big deal, both in story, where it creates a whole lot of possibility, and out of story, where it could potentially herald a change in the way in which the story and the characters are often written. This, in the end, can only be a good thing, I think, and will improve the overall quality of the show. Because this has been one of the enduring criticisms of the show since at least season 3. It may have been even earlier that the complaints started, I don't know. However, I certainly remember them picking up a whole lot of steam sometime around the end of season 3, in that Miracle Queen release window, where the fandom was well and truly melting down about the way the story and the characters were going. Of course, this specifically tied into the way the character of Marinette was portrayed. Always right, always winning, and always looking the best at everything. Her decisions were always the correct ones, and while she could make mistakes, usually she would fix them herself, and teach herself the lessons she needs to learn. Allies? Who needs them? I have sidekicks after all. It was also at this point in time where it seemed like the writing would actively seek to make Cat Noir look weak and pathetic so Ladybug could swoop in to save him and then pretty much defeat the villain solo to make her look insanely strong and competent in comparison. On top of that, she'd have some moments where despite making very obvious mistakes, the show would still try to frame her as being in the right compared to other characters. For instance, when she loses the Miraculouses to Gabe at the end of season 4, Soo-Han then appears at the start of season 5 to berate her about it. She lost all the Miraculouses except for the Ladybug and the cat. It's almost a worst case scenario, and the newly crowned monarch is suddenly a far greater threat than ever, to the point that he almost beats them through the use of the Rabbit Miraculous, which would allow him to travel through time and change the timeline. Soo-Han, in my eyes, is rather rightfully angry about this turn of events, and outright tells Ladybug she's failed as a guardian. Which she has, let's be real. The only guardian we know of who's screwed the pooch worse in story is Fu. And he accidentally created a senti-monster that destroyed the Guardians, all of the other Miraculouses, and the Temple, leaving him alone with most of the Zodiac box, and that's it. Meanwhile, the world's biggest threat now has the ability to use time travel. It's a big oopsie, but Marinette whips out her Uno deck to use a reverse card on Soo-Han and pretty much tells him that he's also to blame because he wasn't there to help her. It's simply her being in extreme denial here and blame shifting, and yet it works, and the story intends for you to agree. Hal Soo-Han even breaks down and agrees with her too. It also happened earlier on during season 4, during Ephemeral, where the story twists itself into a pretzel to show how Ladybug shouldn't know who Cat Noir is, despite her being the Guardian and thus it being her responsibility to know. And that episode also goes on to make Soo-Han look like a total loser dweeb as a result. This is not the entire exhaustive list of examples either, it's just a very tiny taste of what quickly became the status quo of the show. If you ask me, it's even rather heavily present throughout the course of both season 1 and 2 as well. It's not something that just randomly started during season 3, it was always there from the very beginning as an intrinsic feature of the show, and one that's been continually justified by the creators for years. It just at some point became far more heavily pronounced along the way, and people started to notice it more and more as a result of it all. This in turn breeds resentment in the fanbase who over the years well and truly started to turn against Marinette, because let's be honest now, a protagonist who always wins, never really fails at all, and is always right or treated as right by the story, just isn't interesting or compelling in any way whatsoever. Over the years, there's seemingly been instances of the writers trying to turn back the tide and show off flaws and failures for Marinette, seemingly in an effort to add a bit of depth to the character, and these do work for a time. In season 4 especially, we had Marinette struggling with being a guardian, crashing and burning in her relationship with Luca, before losing all the Miraculouses in the finale. Of course, all of this was then undone by Cat Noir looking like a goof all throughout season 4 and being regularly saved by Ladybug, whilst also having that truly soul-crushing finale at the end of season 5 that showed that Ladybug truly is better than everybody else. So, not exactly looking good, is it? It's not a good look for your main protagonist because it leaves her looking infallible, despite it going against some of what you've seen outright on screen. How can you buy into a character, into a hero, that has no real struggles, or who's so easily able to overcome them? This is why the London Special, I think, heralds a change, and in many ways suggests that the status quo is finally starting to shift in a different direction. In my eyes, there's been a lot of promising developments in the way that the story and the characters, particularly Marinette and her interactions with both allies and villains, have been written. It can only be a good thing for the story, and I think it's simply going to lead to a better show overall. For starters, let's look at Marinette. This special, more than ever before, has shown that she's flawed. We've always known that she was a flawed protagonist, a bit creepy at times, a bit too self-assured, but it was not always treated as such by the writing. It would be brushed off, laughed off, and never had much overall narrative consequence. It wouldn't play much into the wider tale, outside of the few incidents I mentioned, and even then it would be pretty quickly undone. So whilst I am apprehensive they could still backtrack on this cool shit that they've set up during the course of season 6, what's the point of always being so cynical and angry all the time? Time for some hope, I think. So, as I said, her decisions are often framed as the right and correct one at all times, and eventually the narrative comes to back up those assertions, whether it makes sense or not. Here, it feels like they're truly planting the seeds of not only her being wrong, but being wrong in a huge way. A way that could fully change the story as we know it, and set up a lot of different story arcs along the way. I'm of course referring to Marinette's decision to do a full cover-up of what Gabe's done and who was involved with it, simply because she doesn't want Adrian to suffer the pain of learning who his father was and why he did what he did. Not only that, but also to ensure that he doesn't lose a mother figure in the form of Natalie, who would certainly be arrested for playing a part in the scheme to change the fabric of reality and for aiding a supervillain in general, really. A number of characters in the special go out of their way to suggest that perhaps it would be better if she simply tells the truth. That way, whilst it would suck that Adrian would suffer, characters like Tomoe and Natalie, who did some bad shit even if she's sorry about it now, can be brought to proper justice. However, despite sage advice from both Natalie and Kagami, Marinette chooses love and compassion over rational thought and pragmatism, which, based on everything that played out in the episode and the warning she was given, feels like it will be the root cause of a lot of drama going forward into season 6. For starters, Tomoe's out and about. She's getting off scot-free despite Natalie revealing to Ladybug she had been an accomplice from the very beginning. On top of that, we don't know what she wants, and Marinette seems to think that a stern talking to from Kagami is going to be enough to get her to reform and set her back on the straight and narrow. No chance, am I right? This is almost certainly going to come and bite her in the ass. Now, she has a villain that has a lot of resources, that's able to work against her and can go down swinging with a lot of knowledge about Gabe. Oopsie! That's also not accounting for the fact that Lila knows that Gabe was Hawkmoth as well. It is fully within her personality for her to use that information for her own ends and cause chaos in the hero team, shattering a lot of public faith in Ladybug, who would have been revealed to be a liar. I won't dive into it too much here, but based on how things have progressed in the special, I think it's all but certain that something along those lines is going to play out. And it's going to be really, really interesting. I'm invested, to tell you the truth. Not only that though, because we also have something we haven't had for a very long time. That is a compelling and, most importantly, competent villain that's going to be contending with the heroes in the form of our new Hawkmoth, Lila. One of the big things a well-rounded protagonist needs is an antagonist that forces them to their limits, forces them to grow and change as a character and go on their own journey. The hero's journey is a classic literary trope and device that you can see dating back through human history. It exists for a reason. It is interesting, it is compelling, and I think a big part of that is due to the hero's interactions with the villain. When Gabe was there, he was a clown. He sucked, and we all know it. He was written to lose with ease and look the fool, whilst Ladybug was whooping ass. Here though, we see the status quo start to change and shift, as Lila in a single episode managed to do things that Gabe never could. She figured out Ladybug's identity, she got a whole heap of blackmail material, and managed to snatch the Miraculouses and get her wish. How good was that? It took time travel shenanigans and a small helping of plot armor for Ladybug to not defeat her, because she didn't really, but to simply stop her. After all, Ladybug realized she couldn't actually take her out. She had too many contingency plans. So she had to fool her into taking the book back and thus wasting the Akuma. It's not a triumphant victory. It's hardly more than a Pyrrhic victory. She won, but it took her all she had. It shows that there's somebody out there that can well and truly contend with her. So to me, this shows so much narrative promise. And it makes me think that going forward into season 6, we're going to witness some of the best writing and development the show's ever seen. Maybe I'm getting a bit carried away, and maybe I'm riding the bandwagon a little bit at the moment, but I'm just really excited. But of course, as always, these have all just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of what I've had to say today? Do you agree with me? Maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.